Welcome to This is Oregon, a podcast where we take you inside research happening at the University of Oregon and show you how it applies to your daily life. My name is Hannah Houston, and I'll be your host for this episode. Our guest for today is John Strong, University of Oregon alum and one of the leading voices in international soccer broadcasting. John, thanks for joining us. To start, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about your role with the World Cup?
Yeah, so my name is John Strong. I am a 2007 graduate of the University of Oregon's School of Journalism and Communication. And I have, for a fair few years now, been I hate saying this, it's so obnoxious when I say it, it sounds so much better in a press release, but I am the lead play-by-play announcer for Fox World Cup soccer coverage. So this will be my third Men's World Cup this year, my fifth World Cup overall, including two Women's World Cups, in addition to many, many games from many, many leagues in different parts of the world. So I've been working for Fox since 2012. So yeah, incredibly exciting that we've been thinking about and knowing this is coming for 8 years. And now it's very, very close. And that's very exciting.
That's so cool. It's right on home turf. So you've become one of the defining voices in soccer broadcasting, but your journey started here at the University of Oregon. Looking back, what experiences at Oregon helped shape your path into sports commentary?
It was the perfect place for me to come. My roots at the University of Oregon really go back to the 1950s when my grandfather came as a student, and I had aunts and uncles attend Oregon and graduate from Oregon, and no one ever told me I had to go. There was never any pressure. There was just, I always knew my whole life I was going to be a Duck. And the fact that I wanted to be a sports broadcaster and the fact that it has such an excellent school of journalism, that was easy for me. What was different about it, though, is that when I came down as a student, the opportunities for students to be broadcasters were actually pretty much non-existent. It was a weird desert at the time of student broadcasting opportunities. And so a lot of it was myself and my best friend, Eric, who I had launched a broadcast program with in high school and who is now sits to my left every single World Cup game we ever do, which is very special. And he and I, through a combination of lucky breaks that fell our way, changes in technology. I mean, we were kind of at the leading edge of being able to do internet broadcasting. That was a very new thing in the mid-2000s when I was a student. And then also just good old-fashioned harassing people in charge of various places. That we were able to create these opportunities for ourselves, both at the campus radio station, KWVA, but also on the athletic department's website, and then some other opportunities with high school sports, and there was a local junior hockey team at the time that just launched, and we were able to create these opportunities where we were calling all these games, and we're able to leave as graduates in an industry where your degree matters far less than your experience. We were able to leave Oregon with a ton of experience, calling everything from Oregon women's soccer to women's lacrosse to softball. He called the volleyball games. And as I said, high school state championships, junior hockey, everything. Opportunities as well in Portland with the Timbers and the Beavers when they were still there. And that was a very special thing. You know, if you think about the classic sort of Malcolm Gladwell concept of you need 10,000 hours of practice to become proficient at anything, I was able to put a lot of hours on my clock as a student at the University of Oregon. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of now, that as I say, sort of the seeds that we planted, that others like Joey McMurray came in and kind of watered and tended the garden after us. We now at the University of Oregon enjoy what I would put up against any school in the country, whether that's Syracuse or USC or anywhere, for an incredibly large, robust program of student broadcast opportunities, radio, television, in front of the camera, behind the camera. It's incredible what we have now at Oregon. And it's kind of wild to think that, none of that was there when I was a student, but I'm so proud of what we were able to kind of help create at the time and what it's become in the years since.
I had no idea you were such a trailblazer in this program here and that you knew Eric for that long too. While you were at Oregon, were there any mentors or opportunities that helped shape your approach to storytelling and commentary?
I think anyone who is successful in anything has a long list of people that they owe their success to. And that's part of what motivates all of us who can find success in what we do to want to pay that back to that next generation. And so From a journalism school standpoint, Rebecca Force, who was one of the legendary teachers and professors in the history of the Oregon SOJC, she was instrumental in sort of the classroom learning side of my time at Oregon, but also giving me key fundamental concepts that help me really understand what broadcasting is. One of which I have cited thousands of times to aspiring broadcasters since. Junior year, and we were first getting the opportunity down what used to be the studio in the basement of Allen Hall. And we were getting our first opportunities to be in front of the camera, to pretend to be news anchors and figure out what that looks and sounds like. And she said to us, whatever you do not read the news off the teleprompter. Tell the news to your grandma. And that concept of thinking about a one-to-one conversation with someone every single time I go on the air, that has been instrumental to my success. And it's hard because we are in this odd thing as a broadcaster where you are speaking to an audience you never see, you never hear, you never really interact with necessarily. But you have to keep that connection as if you are in a public place or you're just sitting down to coffee with someone. So that was hugely important from Rebecca's standpoint. Another person that was hugely influential was Jen Larson, who is now Jen Beck. She was the coach of the inaugural Oregon women's lacrosse team, which took to the field in the beginning of 2005. And she was recruiting lacrosse players mainly from back east. And keep in mind, these are parents at the time who are expecting their young women, their daughters, to go to small liberal arts colleges somewhere in the Northeast where they'd be a couple hours drive away and they watch their kids play lacrosse. And then all of a sudden they're being told, hey, I want to go play for the Oregon Ducks. And, some of these girls had never even been to the state of Oregon before they came on their official visits. So what Jen was promising them was, we're going to put these games on the internet. We're going to broadcast these games so you can stay in touch without having a real plan necessarily. It was a great idea. And so it was a note that she stuck on the door of the campus radio station that I was handed in a hallway at Allen Hall beginning of my sophomore year. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't even understand that women's lacrosse and men's lacrosse are largely different sports. But I was willing to say yes to the opportunity and throw myself into something unfamiliar and uncomfortable, which not only that it ended up leading to a series of other opportunities, on its own it was incredibly fun. So those are two people that I think deserve a lot of public praise and credit for being put into my life and playing a role in my path, that without those two, I don't know how my story turns out. And I'm very thankful. And that's why I say to a lot of people, not only is the University of Oregon so incredibly important to me, but it's important to me that I come back and I stay connected. And can I help to play that role for other young broadcasters that people like Rebecca and Jen played for me? It's very important to me.
I love that. And we all at the University of Oregon are very thankful that you have stayed so involved. So switching gears a little bit, for listeners who only hear the final broadcast, what actually goes into preparing to call a World Cup match?
I've described it often as the equivalent of an open book test, a final exam. You can have your notes in front of you. You just don't know what the questions are going to be. And so that's a lot of what I do when I prepare for a game is, can I become an expert in these two teams? Can I have notes in front of me for every possible eventuality, such that whether the star player or maybe the backup right back who's only on the field because of an injury scores the winning goal, what can I say to contextualize that? What can I say to tell that story? When you have a player who either does something really good or does something really bad, and the World Feed broadcast director does that kind of, close-up, zoomed-in camera shot of them, and I've got 20 seconds to tell America something about this player, what would I say? And it's different for each player. It's different in each kind of context, but that's the broader approach when I call a game, is I want to be an expert in the storylines, in the players, and I want to be prepared with information and knowledge and context for anything that might happen. Now, when you're talking about a World Cup, there are two things about the World Cup that make that very challenging. The first is there are a ton of teams. So on my schedule for the group stage, we're doing 11 games in 15 days. So that's 22 teams. Now we're seeing a couple teams multiple times, but I have to prepare notes for 18 different teams. And each team has 26 players on the roster. So I'm responsible for, I didn't take math classes at Oregon, but it's a lot of these little stickers. They're shipping labels that I buy at an office supply store, and I write it out on hand, and I stick it on a manila folder. And doing all of that, but also with the awareness, as I said, it's 11 games in 15 days. I don't have time between games to be doing much, let alone do I have the mental energy as we're running off from stadium to the airport, airport to the hotel, hotel to the stadium. So that work has to be done, most of it ahead of time. That's a lot of what I've been doing this spring, is until the final rosters are announced and until players play their final game for their club teams, I can't do the final bits. But what I'm doing is I'm collecting feature stories, notes and nuggets, little interesting things that I'm putting in these documents that I can then, when it's time for the heavy lifting, reference that all back. So the prep is months. In some ways, the prep is years, because you're also drawing back on prior times you've called games with these teams and these players, prior World Cups, leaning on that knowledge and history that you have. Also understanding that sometimes the most important piece of information comes 2 hours before kickoff, and you have to be prepared for that as well. So it is exhausting in the best possible way. It is the most enjoyable 40-day, 24/7 adrenaline high anyone can possibly experience, and it's probably a good thing we only have to do this every 4 years. But it's incredible to sort of build up for 4 years to have this remarkable 6 weeks of chaos. It really is a special thing.
When you're preparing for a match, how do you balance the research and the statistics side with the storytelling side of it?
One of the most important things in calling a game is the willingness and the ability to not use most of what you have prepared. If you are using on air most of what you have prepared, you're talking way too much. Or there was like a 10-minute delay for something and you're just filling time. And that, I think, is something that's really difficult for a variety of reasons, the least of which because I find it really interesting. Every player on the field at a World Cup has lived their own life's journey to get to this wonderful moment. I want to celebrate that, tell that story. In general, I love the storytelling aspect. I think statistics can be part of that. It's a balance. I can't just throw, sort of a salad of numbers at people and expect them to understand it. That's, again, something you learn in broadcasting is anytime you're speaking to an audience, you have to assume they're doing something else at the same time. So in the old days on radio, it was, well, they're driving in their car. Well, nowadays, even people watching on television, they're not giving you their full focus. They're on their phone. They're talking with their friends. The kids are screaming in the background, whatever it is. And so you have to be mindful of when you only have a certain percentage of their attention, if you throw too much information at them, it's going to become white noise. And so being judicious in when and what and how you use this information in front of you, as compared to giving your analyst time to talk, as compared to giving your sideline reporter time to talk, as compared to just shutting up and staying out of the way and letting the crowd noise and the visuals tell the story. That's something that comes with experience. I'm still getting better at that. That's a huge focus for me at this World Cup, is just to do less. Be prepared for everything, but be willing to do very little of it.
I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Being flexible is always important. The World Cup carries enormous emotion and pressure, not just for the athletes, but I'd assume for the broadcasters as well. How do you stay present and composed during some of those really big moments?
One of the really cool things I've gotten to do in my career, the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. And a couple years ago, we did it at the Billie Jean King USTA National Tennis Center. And when you walk out on center court, there's a plaque there with the Billie Jean King quote, "Pressure is a privilege." And I love that concept. And so, yes, is there pressure on us? Sure, but it's a wonderful privilege. It's an incredible opportunity to have that. As I said, we don't see our audience. It's probably a good thing, because if I was thinking consciously about how many millions of people are listening to my voice, I'd be terrified. The flip side of it is I sometimes forget we're on live television and it's not just me goofing around with my buddies, and so I have to check myself in certain moments. But it's a really special thing to be in this position, particularly because I love soccer so much. It's such a passion of mine. And soccer only gets these opportunities very rarely in this country. This is a standard state of being in so much of the rest of the world, where it's not just that soccer is the most popular sport in most countries in the world. It's the only major sport in many countries around the world. It's the NFL plus the NBA plus Major League Baseball plus everything else, all wrapped into one. And so for us to have once every 4 years this sort of window in this moment in time to be able to have so many people watching soccer, that's really cool. That's really fun for me. And so while early in my career, I absolutely let the pressure of being perfect get to me. This is my one chance. I've got to do it perfectly. I've done a lot better in recent years, still a work in progress, of enjoying it and having fun and doing it with a smile on my face. My wife, Nicole, always says that when she can hear my smile, my work is better. And trying to have the mentality of, golly gee whiz, isn't this neat? We get to do this. And if they fire me tomorrow, well, at least I still got to do it. But not, it's like we would say with a player, don't play trying to win rather than play trying to avoid losing. And I think that's the mentality that I've tried to bring to it. Have fun, enjoy, don't be afraid of making a mistake. Do the best you can. And that's a really special thing to be able to. Listen, at the end of the day, I get to support my family by going to World Cup games. That's not a real job. I don't know, whatever miracle of circumstance that I can support my family doing that. But if that's the hardest thing is the pressure of a bunch of people listening to me, that's pretty easy.
That is pretty cool. You've called matches for audiences around the world. What makes the World Cup unique from a storytelling or broadcasting perspective?
We are in an era right now where professional club soccer has never been bigger. These big clubs like Barcelona and Real Madrid and Manchester United, these are global brands as big as any Fortune 500 country with global fan bases. And yet, any player who you would think of as truly the biggest legends of the sport, it's because of what they did at the World Cup. Lionel Messi, for all that he has accomplished, it was always a yes, but he has not won a World Cup until he did. Cristiano Ronaldo is going to have that same opportunity with Portugal at this tournament. I think the fact that it is only once every 4 years, we are in to borrow a phrase from one of my favorite bands, Arcade Fire, we're in an era of infinite content. And scarcity, which used to provide value, the opposite has happened in every walk of life, where it's just more. Well, the World Cup, while yes, it has expanded this year to 48 teams instead of 32, it remains a once every 4 year thing. It is country against country, and there's a scale to that is really special. It is also the best comparison in some ways is to the Olympics, of course. Well, a World Cup is 3 times longer than an Olympics is generally 2 weeks of competition. We're talking about 6 weeks of competition. It also builds up to one moment. There's only one game going on at a time most days, and we build up towards the final, which is, it's impossible to say with certainty how many billions of people around the globe are watching that game, but it's quite a few. And so there are unique things even to other major sporting events that make this very special. Then when you're talking about a World Cup on home soil, as we have here, then when you're talking about, being a part of a company at Fox Sports where, they are putting every available resource towards this. Even we just recently announced James Corden, late night talk show host who recently, a couple of years ago, stopped doing his show. He's coming out of retirement to host a late night show during the World Cup every night on Fox. He's going to be hosting a show sort of like recapping the day and having fun. That's the type of stuff. And then here's little old me who gets to call the games. That type of stuff is really special because there is a scale to it. There is the emotions of country and flag. There's the scarcity of it. And the fact that it is the world's most popular sport. All of those things combined make this something different and special to anything else.
It does feel very unifying. Even people who wouldn't on a day-to-day basis say that they are avid soccer fans, they'll be talking about the World Cup. Sports media has changed dramatically since your time as a student here at Oregon. What advice would you give students today who want to work in broadcasting or sports media?
It's interesting because in so many ways, parts of our business have changed significantly. Other parts of our business have kind of stayed the same in the sense that the means of distribution have changed. There was a time when it would have been all about linear broadcast television. Well, now it's just as much about streaming. At the same time, being a storyteller, being able to provide compelling information to people, that doesn't change. Even as the means of distribution change, and even as, we go from podcast to video podcast to, these sorts of things, some of the concepts of communication, of broadcasting, actually do remain the same. And I think that's the balance, is to be innovative to trends, to understand how the audience is changing, but to try to keep some of the bedrock foundational stuff. Now, I'm also in some ways the worst person to ask about that, because I am resolutely analog in an increasingly digital world. All of the notes I do are handwritten. I have exactly zero social media presence, which is the bane of certain people I work with. That's the case. Those are deliberate decisions that I have made for a variety of reasons, including my own mental health. And so sometimes I'll speak with, students at Oregon who, I want to be like this person, I want to be like that person. I'm like, I can't help you because I don't know how to do that. I do a very specific thing in a very specific lane. But I am a big believer in getting the story right, making the story interesting, try to tell people something that they don't know, or try to tell them something that they do know in a different way. Those are concepts that have been true for centuries in storytelling and in broadcasting and in writing and whatever it is. The technology changes, but I think that the fundamentals remain the same. And that's something that I think is important for the University of Oregon. It is something that the SOJC keeps its eye on the ball for, is keeping the fundamentals the same, even as everything else changes around them. And if you don't have good fundamentals, it doesn't matter the other stuff. But if you do have good fundamentals, ideally, and I'm an example of this, you can be somewhat ignorant and naive to some of the technological changes, or just willfully ignorant, and still be able to find success.
I love that. So you kind of alluded to this, but even with your national broadcasting schedule, you've stayed really connected to the University of Oregon through workshops and guest speaking. Why has maintaining that connection remained so important to you?
I am from Oregon. I am of Oregon. The U of O has made me what I am in so many ways. I take such immense pride at being an Oregon Duck, and I always say I'm not a Duck fan. I'm a Duck, and there's an important difference there. It's great when the football team wins. It's important to the larger thing. But for me, I'm so much more invested in how are we serving students at the SOJC? How are the non-revenue sports like soccer and lacrosse and softball getting on? Those sorts of things. I'm one of, I think, 11 now, including my nephew, who's a freshman this year, across 4 different generations, including distant parts of the family, which is a really special legacy to have. And I think part of it, like I said earlier, is me trying to pay back, or I suppose pay forward what I received. How can I provide that to the next generation of students? And I just, I was down recently on campus this spring for our biannual meeting of the Journalism Advisory Council that I'm on. It's kind of an advisory council for the SOJC of mostly alums, but also successful professionals in the different industries the SOJC serves who have a connection to Oregon. And there's something about that just, it energizes me. It gives me such a sense of purpose, of service in a way that is really important to me, let alone, as I said, just my family heritage and being a part of all that. And I think part of what's fun about it as well is that the people at the University of Oregon, the SOJC, that they want to claim me, I take a lot of pride in because of how much it meant. When I received an award last fall, and I told this story about how when I was a student, I would pass in the basement of Allen Hall every day, the plaque celebrating, I'm not even sure they give us an award anymore, but it was the Senior Man of the Year. And these plaques date back decades of winners every year. Well, my Uncle Tom won the award in, I think, 81 or 82. And I would pass by it all the time and think, how cool would it be if I could win this award and I could have my name near his, even though we have different last names, and sort of, be remembered for my time in that way. And I remember fall of my senior year, being excited to go into the academic advising office and say, okay, how does this award work? What do you have to do? And the lovely woman behind the desk said, well, the first thing we do is we take all of the applicants who have a 4.0 GPA or better. And then what we do, and I said, thank you very much. I turned around and left because I knew that was not going to happen for me. But to have had other means and ways where, and it's not necessarily from my own ego as much as just the pride that I have in being an Oregon Duck, and that pride is reciprocated, that people at Oregon are proud of me. That's a really special, exciting thing to me, and it gives me so much joy. And while it's easier said than done to make the 90-minute drive south from where we live in the Portland suburbs on a regular basis, whenever I go down, as I said, it's energizing, it's good for my soul, it reminds me where I came from, it gives me a renewed sense of appreciation for where I've been able to go, and it's something I always look forward to.
Well, we are all very thankful that you are willing to do that and that you enjoy doing it. So after all these years and all these broadcasts you've done, what still excites you the most when you put on the headset before a match begins?
The fun thing about any live sporting event, and I think the reason why live sports has maintained this unique position in an era of infinite content, when it's incredibly difficult for anything to break through and grab an audience, it's unscripted. And you have to experience it live. You can't wait the 6 weeks and then binge all 6 episodes in one night. You have to be there in the moment. It's a wonderful communal event. It's something, and in fact, one of our departments at Fox, analysts, what do they call it? Audience Insights and Analytics. And they've published papers on the idea that there is a psychological effect that happens with sports fans because it's such a communal event. And I think one of the taglines they say is that sports fans have more friends, or the multi-generational viewing of sports. When I think about my grandfather, it's Oregon football is a big part of that relationship. Denver Broncos football is a big part of the relationship with my dad. Going to Portland Timbers games is a part of my relationship with my son. Going to Portland Thorns games is a part of my relationship with my daughter. That stuff's really cool, and in an era of microcasting where you can, whatever your tastes and interests are, you can find something that clicks with that. And that's really cool. That's really special. And it's given voice to a lot of people who haven't necessarily had a voice in the old 3-network era of sort of, monoculture. That's a very good thing. But it also has an opposite effect, I think, of separating all of us in our own little lanes. And having the opportunity to have things that bring us back together, as you said. We are one of the few countries in the world historically, and I know this seems ironic because we're so politically fractured now. Our sports have never been political in the United States. Whether you are a Lakers fan or a Clippers fan has nothing to do with your politics or your socioeconomic status. That's pretty unique globally. And I think that's something we've done really well in this country historically, is to allow sports to be, and it doesn't mean that you wall yourself off from the realities of the world around you, but it is that opportunity for us to sort of put aside all of the reasons we have to be distrustful or express a real dislike of the people around us. We kind of put that aside and we go sit in Autzen Stadium, or we sit in Matthew Knight Arena, or we sit at the Jane next to people that we might really strongly disagree with on a lot of things very passionately. But we're rooting for the Ducks together, or we're rooting for the Timbers, or the Thorns, or whatever it is. That's really cool. That's really special. And so to be able to be a part of that, to be able to be kind of a voice and a tour guide of sorts to those moments, to help people who don't have the first clue. I'm watching Spain versus Cape Verde. I don't know who any of these people are. Cool. Don't worry about it. Stu and I got you. We're going to help guide you through this. That's a really special, fun thing. And I think, as we said earlier, the World Cup is that unique opportunity where people who not just aren't soccer fans, people who aren't sports fans, tune into that. It's one of those unique cultural things that is very fun. And so the fact that I get to be a part of it in any context, the fact that I get to call the big games, I mean, it still is kind of surreal to me that's what I get to do.
I love that you described yourself as a tour guide. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
I've been trying to find a way to work it in. There is one story that I would like to tell. It's a World Cup related story, but it also involves me violating university bylaws. So I'm hopeful that the statute of limitations has expired, but I've been sitting on this story for 2 decades now, and I feel like now would be the time to tell it. So this was 2006, 20 years ago, and I was a junior, and the beginning of the World Cup was about to come around. The United States was playing their opening game against the Czech Republic Monday morning at 9 a.m. Well, this was the Monday of finals week. And the week before, we find out, Monday morning at 8 a.m., that's when the final exam for the economics class that I'm in is happening. Now, I was a major at the SOJC. I was actually an economics minor. And this was one of those classes where they said, we are weeding out the pretenders from those who are going to go on to a major or a minor track. And I was deeply concerned about this, the exam starts at 8, the kickoff's at 9, but I'm not going to miss kickoff. I don't want to rush through this final. So I emailed my professor, and I said in the email, I recognize off the front how ridiculous this is, but can I just start it an hour early? I'm not trying to cheat. Let me start it an hour early. So he didn't respond in the day and a half after I sent the email until we meet for class the next time. And he begins the class by saying, I received an email from one of you, and I'm going, about this clash that we have in schedule with the opening of the U.S. World Cup game, and how many of you are soccer fans are going to be watching the World Cup? And I did the thing where I kind of waited to raise my hand in case I was the only one, and about a third of the class raised their hands. I thought, okay, that's interesting. And he said, and this guy, and he was a great professor. He was an economics professor for a long time, had lived in Africa. He was British, kind of an ex-hippie type with a big ponytail in the back. And he said, I myself am not a football fan. That's where we call it where I'm from, but I'm from the UK. I understand what it means. I've been told by the head of our department that it is against university bylaws for us to begin the final exam at any time other than the published one. However, I've also spoken with the superintendent of the building, who has said the doors here are unlocked every morning at 7 a.m. So I will be in this room Monday morning at 7 a.m. enjoying my New York Times and my coffee, and if any of you want to join me for any purpose whatsoever, you're welcome to do so. So I went up and introduced myself to him after the class. I met him, it was one of those beautiful Eugene mornings where it was super sunny early. We went to I forget the name of it, the coffee shop just to the the west edge of campus on the other side of the duck store. We chatted, came in, started the exam at 7 a.m. I still rushed through it. I was out of there like a shot. But I remember sitting, I watched that game at Taylor's, rest in peace. And I remember looking up at one point before kickoff, and it was packed. And I'm looking at the door, and there's a line of people trying to get in from the door, and I can hear one of them say, oh man, Rennie's is packed too. Where are we going to watch the game? I remember thinking to myself, this is incredible. I felt like 4 years ago, the 2002 World Cup, I was a part of a secret club. I was like the only kid in my high school that knew what was going on. And now Taylor's and Rennie's are both packed for this World Cup game. And that's a really special, it's a funny story, but it's also a special thing to think about is the growth of the sport over time. One of the few social media videos we saw when we were in Qatar at the last World Cup was students at the EMU watching the U.S.-Iran game because it was on a Tuesday. It was during class. And I don't know if any of them knew or cared it was a fellow Duck who was calling the game. But I remember just thinking about that journey from being a student trying to rearrange final exams to watch a game to now being at the World Cup calling the game. And so those memories and those emotions, that's a really special part of sort of what I'm bringing in my brain and in my heart to the beginning of this game. And I will say as a postscript, I always get it was either a B+ on the final or an A- on the class or vice versa. But it ended up working out fine, except for the U.S., who got hammered 3-0 and ended up going out in the group stage. It was a bad World Cup for them. But everything else turned out fine.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that with us. I'm going to hope that the statute of limitations is passed on that, because what a fantastic professor.
Hopefully they don't take my degree away. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, John. And thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely to have you.
Hannah, an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
If you're interested in learning more about what we discussed in this episode, check out the links in the episode description. And don't forget to follow This is Oregon for more stories from the University of Oregon. See you next time. This is Oregon is produced by the Division of University Communications. For more of the latest University of Oregon research and news, visit news.uoregon.edu or find us on your favorite social media platform using the handle @uoregon. Thanks for listening, and go Ducks!